All right, so rookie rankings. You had Wembanyama number one. How much time do you want to spend talking about him? Let's
Hey,
limit ourselves to 40 seconds. Go.
okay. I mean, the thing about Wembanyama, you're going to hear some kind of. I was awaiting some of the dialogues I thought I would hear. I mean, the Chet Wemby thing. We talked a little bit about it on group chat. I think that the situations are always really big. I think this is a good segue into just kind of the thinking behind the rankings. I tried to go into it with rewarding older players who were doing well in like, winning situations, and then you're weighing it with like sort of the grace that comes with guys that have bigger roles, also who are younger.
Yeah.
Chet is on a team that is ahead. It's more sort of actualized than the Spurs, as you and I have talked about, as the people in the Ringer have talked about ad nauseum.
And they needed somebody who is exactly like him. So that helped too.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's just fitting in on a lower usage, and like just his touches have been different, whereas Wemby's usage is, I think, 30%. And a lot of that has been sort of leaning on the areas of his game that are kind of inefficient right now. So it's been a little messier. But I think when you compare age and situation, and that extra year has been big for Chet. So I still consider, Wemby's projection being the thing. And he's had some really brilliant high points too already in this early season.
Well, I'm already in the record. I hate the Sohan as the point guard, the whole experiment. It just feels like stealth tanking to me. And I'm just not messing around if I have this dude. I want to surround him with people that will help him actualize his potential as fast as possible. I have no interest in spending the year trying to figure out if Jeremy Sohan could be my point guard. Even if I have, they have Jones, who every time he comes in, his plus minus is way up. But even two Joneses, I'm fine with, because the thing that's frustrating about Wembanyama is there's these stretches where he's just not involved for, 4 or 5 minutes because they're not getting fast break points because nobody can run a fast break. And meanwhile, he's the perfect guy to do that. Doesn't seem like really anybody can throw a good entry pass on his entire team other than the backup point guard. And then they'll just forget about him. And I think that Knicks game was a perfect example where it wasn't just that he had a bad game. It was like he wasn't involved in the game, which is almost worse. I want him involved everywhere. I want somebody looking out for him, thinking about him, taking care of him, pouring water on him like he's a plant. And they do not have that this year. And I think it's an important thing that they're missing.
Yeah, I feel like their roster is sort of like they have a lot of like working appendages, but they need some like central nervous system / brain type things to like,
Totally.
Sohan is like, he's a great connector. That's a theme. Well, that's a theme of this class is like connectors. We can talk more about that and defenders and things like that. Like Sohan in the right position is going to be great, but people don't respect him as like a pull up threat. People don't respect, like, he's not like the scoring threat. I think that you can like drive your offense. Like you can't have him as like the initiator and expect that to be the thing. I think one more guy, because Keldon is a score first guy who's learning how to get off the ball and pass a little bit. Vassell, exact same thing. And, those guys, when they want to get into their rhythms, like Keldon was like notoriously rough as a decision maker coming out of college. Vassell is learning to do this on the job too. I think sometimes when you combine that with the fact that we saw in that Knicks game that Vic just can't run a straight line right now. Like so we're not seeing him hard run to the rim. And Chet couldn't do that really a year ago either. He used to just evaporate in contact. So I think they're just kind of balancing that with like, I think the most likely outcome for Vic is that he's going to be like an elbow short corner operator the way Dirk was, because he can see. I was floating this to somebody. I was like, when you stack all the elite defensive stuff, I think that's going to happen for him. He is a really good passer too. You kind of you keep catching yourself being like, is this too much? Like, is this really happening? But like, I think he's going to become a great passer. So I still am like 100% in on the upside with him.
I am 100% in as well. And I've loved Chet. And obviously, I love that OKC team. I have a lot of future bets and all kinds of things with them. So I watch a lot of them anyway. And there's certain types of teams they're just going to have problems with, right? When they play Jonas Valanciunas, it's like, oh shit, that guy is 45 pounds bigger than everybody in the Thunder. They play Jokic. It's like, well, this is a wrap. He's getting a 38 and 19 and 10. But the thing that I've loved about him is his ability to attack people off the dribble, which I think I had just forgotten about because I hadn't seen him, for 2 years. But but I just wasn't expecting that because he's so tall. You just think he's going to like fall over when he does it. But he
Mhm.
really does have the ability to go by people or pull up. And on top of that, all the other stuff. Like we knew the defense was going to be there. We knew the offensive rebounding. And then he has some fuck you in him, which I think you could see from 10th grade. But to me, he's actually further up the ladder for me than I was expecting. Like he's more
Yeah.
of a finished project,
Oh
more
yeah.
of a finished product than I really thought. I thought this was going to be like his kind of like the year Wemby's having right now. But he's kind of having a sophomore year, but he didn't have a freshman year. So I don't
Yeah.
really understand that piece.
No, I was putting it. I put in there a clip. I was just kind of watching what their offense does, and like when they'll have sequences where Dort will have it around the basket, or they'll go to offensive rebound, and if they get the ball back, they just sort of like exhale basically like an organism. Like you'll just see their offense like, and then what happens? Lo and behold, they'll exhale, and then you'll see these gaps open up, and then suddenly Jalen Williams, Shea Gilgeous, is like they're these driving lanes. It's just a really interesting thing to watch, like the way it's working, because you got to respect Chet and shooting.
Well, they're playing tonight, unfortunately. They're playing the Warriors, so we'll see what happens. That's an interesting game for them because I like them against any small ball team or smaller team. And the Warriors, that's kind of the model for where they want to be, right? Just being able to switch on defense. Just having got 5 guys who can attack on the floor, a lot of shooting. Their 3-point shooting is what's killed them in the losses they've had. Like they'll just go like 7 for 38 from 3 and have these things. But for the most part, I like the pieces. And I think the West is, the best team is Denver in the West. Minnesota is the second best team right now. Now that might change as we go, but they, I think, have number 2 locked up for now.
Mm-hmm.
But that number 3 spot's open. And, I look through everybody and it's like, oh, they could beat that team. They could beat that team. So anyway, really good year for him. Now, Oscar Thompson versus Chet Holmgren. You had Thompson third on the Pistons. He is my favorite rookie in a while.
Oh, in a while.
From this respect, whatever my expectations were versus what I've been watching, I'm just like, I fell in immediate love with him. He is like the perfect energy / wing defender, gives a shit. Just everything he does is additive. He's the type of guy that no matter what situation he is, the team's just better if he's on the team. I've never seen a game where he wasn't impactful in some way. And I know like that, yeah, the shooting needs to get better, all that stuff. But the stuff he's doing, it's really rare for a perimeter guy. Like you're talking about there's some Pippen pieces in there. There's some Sean Marion pieces. You're talking about like hallowed ground, and he's there already. Like he could have a 20 rebound game tomorrow night, and I wouldn't be surprised, right? He could have 10 offensive rebounds in a game. I wouldn't be surprised. Like when you watch him, the eye test is backing up the stats. He's averaging 10 rebounds a game as a rookie, and he's not a front court player. So I don't even know who's like him in the league. He's already a 101, and I know you had him ranked third, but what are you seeing?
I mean, he surprised me. Like there were things that didn't surprise me. Like I knew he was competitive, and the thing with the Thompson twins that you always had to kind of weigh was who they played. They were a little older in the overtime elite, and they were playing these. The games were just hard to watch. They would inevitably turn into these like just transition fests that would look like bad kind of
which is
summer
bad
games.
for him because of his style. You want him in like the highest level games with like some structure, and then he really stands out. The shit he does,
Yeah, and I think playing next to a twin brother who kind of has a similar kind of skill set profile, I leaned Amin because I thought Amin's passing and like Amin's had kind of a rougher start, so we'll see if like it evens out and they both end up being incredible. But like the defensive, I think he's also in kind of like a weird, like Houston situation. They have all these guys that are kind of graduating as like their touches are going to go up, their role is going to increase and change, and then they added Brooks and Fred, so it's like I think he's kind of getting squeezed by some of that, but I think playing next to Amin, like who was another just total non-shooter, I think he's always there's a weird fit thing going on where we're starting to see, and I think when Bogdanovich comes back, we're even going to see it even more. Is that like when you put you can almost play Asar like a big, like if it, and I think it starts to, he can be the cutter. He can really pass the ball. That's another thing. He'll have these plays where he'll cut and, he'll make these crazy like head, shoulder, eye fake passes to cutters. He's really, really good at like finishing. Or like his percentage isn't reflecting that right now, but he's really, really athletic around the rim, crazy in transition. But the defense, man, the defense is the thing, and that's like a common thing that keeps coming up in this class. Is I really think he could be an all defense player. I really think it's a matter of when, because he's been terrorizing people. Like he gave Shea a hard time. He's super, super disruptive around the basket. He's something else, man.
I absolutely love that dude. I really do. Like, I just can't believe, first of all, how good he is right away. And the fact that he can grab like 16 rebounds in a game in his ninth game as a rookie against like a good team. But that I just, I always look at this stuff like, would it be fun to play with that guy? If I was still playing pickup, is that a guy you'd want on your team? He is like the exact guy you would want on your team if you were just picking like, all right, I'm going to run with these fives. I want this guy. Like, all he's doing, he doesn't care if he has the ball. All he's going to do is try to help. He's going to bust his ass. He's going to create plays all over the place. And the defense is like just jaw dropping.
He
like,
wants to guard the best player. That's another thing.
Yeah.
He wants to. Yeah.
The defense is jaw dropping, and it changes the trajectory of that team. And I don't know what's going to end up happening with them, because you could argue, they're probably one of the worst 7 teams in the league. But when Bogdanovich comes back, and from what we've seen from Cade already, and they have a lot of big guys to throw, and then you throw him in there, like they're just going to be a bitch to play. They're going to be really hard. They're going to have shooting. They're going to have rebounding. They're going to have size. And then if Cade can keep elevating, like that's a team that is, I think as the season goes along, I texted you, I think you had Chet in the right spot at 2. But Thompson, like if you had Thompson at 2, I don't think I would have been upset, because to me, he's like a safer bet. Chet, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with his body.
Oh, wow.
No. I'm talking health-wise, physicality. Like, I watch Chet, and same thing with Wemby, where I'm just nervous half the time. Anytime somebody's diving for a loose ball, you always, like, they're just too tall. They can't get out of the way, and I'm just always worried they're going to get hurt. And this Thompson is just like, this guy's not. This guy is a machine.
Yeah. I'm more worried about Vic on that front than Chet. I feel like Chet has gotten like almost sneakily strong in the past year. I know.
I hope you're right.
Cliche,
maybe it's the legacy from last year. Like he just gets hurt in that summer league game, and it's like, what happened? Chet's gone already. But the tall, gangly guys, mate, you called Chet a gangly savant.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to worry about a gangly savant health wise for 15 years. I just am.
Did you hear me talking about how like I mean like the guy that Kevin actually did this too independently of me, I found out later, was like I was trying to project him, and I kept coming back to like Pau Gasol. Like he's like, Pau played differently because he grew up in a different era, but he would have shot threes if he were an international prospect coming in now. But I was like, I was joking with the group chat guys. I was like, when we were at Salt Lake City last year, I had just done that, and I was like, Pau Gasol was like in the roundabout of our hotel, and I was like, just kind of like looking at his frame in a way that might have been a little creepy, but I was just kind of, because I had that in my mind, and I was just like, Pal's pretty skinny. He just put on a lot of weight, and like, I don't know. I think the thing you said about the Pistons, though, back to them, is interesting, because if Asar is a certainty, they took Ivy because the talent was there, and I think that's always smart. Like Houston did that with Whitmore too. If there's a guy there, it's worth taking that risk. Just take the talent. But I just think, I don't know that they can have 3 dissonant kind of shaky shooters, like with Ivy and with Killian. Killian obviously is probably fingernails on the edge of the cliff right now. I just think, especially with Cade playing like a pick and roll style, he's capable of doing other stuff, but like those defenses are all about like, you can keep everything in front of you. I just wonder if they should like kind of lean towards picking one of those guys. And like, I'm kind of dubious about that style, because the shooting thing, the bill always comes due with that stuff. Like they're going to have to figure that out, because he's just a total non-shooter right now.
Cade and Asar, I don't really care. I'm good. I can put a real team around those 2 guys. This is a borderline turn the camera on Kyle. As you know, I probably own the most Scoot Henderson stock. And by the way, if people are selling, I'll happily buy it. I did wonder though, knowing what we know now about Asar, could he have been the Portland pick, and then you keep Dame for what we're watching from him, and then what does Portland look like? Because it's like, oh man, we can't keep Dame. We're rebuilding. But if you put the stuff he's doing in Detroit in Portland with Dame and with the rest of the pieces they had, and maybe you still figure out how to make that Ayton trade, because Phoenix clearly wanted Nurkic, they want to get rid of the money. But there's some version of a Portland team where they take Asar and not Scoot, where I'm like, it's kind of a fun team because he's like literally the perfect guy for what the Dame version of that team was, right? So I don't know. It's a interesting sliding doors that I never expected to entertain.
I entertained Mann at number 2 all year last year. Like I thought that it was very feasible. But the thing is that I think I underrated Asar's playmaking a little bit. And on that team that you're describing hypothetically, I mean, that's pretty, I think he would fit with them. Does it elevate them to, I mean, fun, I think is where it elevates them to. Maybe it's just, I don't know. But I don't know. Would it be, he provides more things, I think, like intangibles than like Thibault does. I compared his like shooting repertoire to Thibault. I feel like it's always going to be similar to that. But that's an interesting idea. I still think, but that would imply that you think they shouldn't have taken Scoot though, right? And you still think that Portland should have taken Scoot.
Yeah, I'm in on Scoot. I'm still buying everyone's stock. And the key to him should be a downhill guy, the same way Derrick Rose and Westbrook when they came into the league the first 2 years. That's who he has to be. And you had some stats in there about his when you had him ranked number 10 on this, about some of his pull-up jumper stuff. Like, that's not who he is. Get to the rim, get downhill, slash and kick, get to the rim. That's who you are. And I just think he seemed a little overwhelmed the first couple games. Plus, they had this new team. They're still making trades all the way up to this season. I'm not worried about him. I think other people are, though. I think this draft was so good that if somebody's not awesome right away, and then you look at all these other guys, you had 15 guys listed in this thing, and I like all of the guys. This is one of those rare drafts where it's like, man, this is going to be some redraft in a couple of years. All right, so you had Lively at 4 on Dallas, and this is an interesting one. We've talked about him a little bit already, but just this is the fallacy of that 1 year, one and done, where you have these guys who are top 5 in their class, top 3, whatever, and then the college season maybe doesn't go quite what you think, and then the overreaction happens. It was hard to watch Lively at Duke last year and think that he would end up being the 4th player in this list. But then you watch him on the right team, and I think that playing with Luka, and it seems like he's in the right situation for the most part, but they're accentuating all the things he's good at. But more importantly, he really gives a shit. And that's a recurring theme of this class specifically, is these guys really play hard and really care, and they really give a shit. And that's what surprised me about him. Did you see that quality at Duke or no?
I saw there were some things. I mean, like I knew that he had. I really think that the spacing and the lack of playmaking and the lack of shooting, that's a really tough. I mean, those things interact with each other and cause one another, obviously. But like at Duke, it penalized him more than I think anybody else on that team. And like it was tough because he also had a slow start to the year. I think he had a calf injury. So, and from what I was watching at lower levels, his learning curve was pretty steep in terms of like learning defensive concepts and things like that. The thing that I've had a lot of kind of back and forth talking, like the main sort of like arguments that I've heard people throw is that like Lively versus like a Jordan Hawkins, and I think that's something you have to like weigh in a class like this. Is you mentioned Scoot, like the guys that I'm building into these rankings ideally some forgiveness for role, because if you look at like touch time and like number of dribbles and things like that, like Lively's, you mentioned, I said this in the piece, but like you couldn't, if you told me who is the perfect human being for Derek Lively to be paired with, it's Luka. So, and now you give him like, that's okay. That's a condition, but also like Lively is doing his part in it. Like he's reading the screens, he's reading when to roll. Defensively, he's been okay. And I think that's one, like I think the two of the hardest jobs are like to be a defensive anchor as a rookie if you're a big, and to be a point guard, just because it's so much, it's so fast. I think he deserves a lot of credit for as good as he's been.
I think worst case scenario, he's a 25-minute a game guy who's really impactful and has good stats and fits in with certain types of players. And that's your worst case scenario for him now. And then the best case scenario is he becomes like a Tyson Chandlery, but even more springy and, kind of the late 2000s version of Chandler crossed with like some Nick Claxton in there. But we've seen guys who do all the stuff he does. Those guys come in the league and they succeed over and over again. So we know what he is. The fit thing's a great point because Thompson on Houston, worst possible team for him, right? Like Van Vliet, Brooks, Jalen Green, they really have something already. Ime seems to think his team's good, and he's right. I think that team's actually pretty good. They're running everything through Şengün, and Şengün has turned into a revelation this season. And I just don't see him getting the touches on that team. It doesn't mean he's a bad pick, but like that's the kind of guy, man, I wish he would gone to Chicago, or I could think of, the two of us could probably think of 5 teams that would be like, oh, if he'd gone to that team, that would have been really fun. And this team, I just don't think he's going to get the possessions. Whereas, like, I think if they'd taken Asar, I think he actually would have played more for them because they kind of need one more guy like that, just flying around, helping Şengün on the rebounding. But, fit is a huge part of this. I think Ivy's on the wrong team. And is it a Dennis Smith Jr. situation where the only situation is he needs to have the ball all the time, but then your team has no ceiling? Or is he somebody that can play off other players? We don't know yet, but it doesn't look right with him on the Pistons because I've enjoyed watching the Pistons, and Monty's already yanking him around. I'm not really sure what he is yet. Like I don't know what the comp would be for him, but I look at Mann and I'm just like I have no idea. We're not going to know this year. He'll have moments. He'll probably have one game when he comes in and puts up 20 in 15 minutes. Like oh look at him, but for the most part, I just don't think he's going to play a lot this year.
Yeah, I think we're still, we're 10, 11 games in. We're still in like 12 in some cases. Like we're still in like forgiveness mode where, Suggs went through this a couple years ago where when he got drafted, there were a lot of people who were like, okay, Jalen Suggs going to bring balance and order to the Magic. And then we got to Christmas time and we were like, well, I just think there's a net under some of these guys, I think, of like adjustment period because a lot of good NBA point guards struggle. I've brought up Darius Garland was considered the worst player in the league by like every metric his rookie year. And things started to come around. I think you do have to give some grace, but for now, we're in the like benefit of the doubt, because if it was pure raw performance like Scoot would be and Amen wouldn't be in consideration. Like they're getting a big benefit of the doubt based on what I project them as and what their situation is. But as it goes along, I think that net is going to kind of loosen, understandably.
Well, you had Wallace on OKC number 5, and you had Brandon Miller on Charlotte number 6. And I actually would add Wallace 4 and Brandon Miller 5 and Lively 6. But this is why the rankings are so fun. Everybody's got their own opinion on them. Wallace is another one. I mean, you talked about this in the piece, and I thought it was a great point. I never really thought about it this season, even though I'm watching all these games. The defensive upside of this class, you might have 4 first-team all-defense guys in the future on this list, and Wallace is one of those dudes. Wallace and Asar, like both of those dudes, I think have first-team all-defense potential, shutdown potential. They, to me, have that Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards going against the Celtics side of, oh shit. Oh, these guys are bringing it. These guys are hard to get by. But Wallace, they trade up, they get Bertans' salary to trade up 2 spots. It's like, man, couldn't you got him at 12? Was that worth the risk? It was worth it. They can't keep him off the floor. And to me, the interesting piece with him is he going to slide in there in crunch time eventually? Is he going to be like a finishing guy for them?
He's dependable. That's the thing. He's a low waist player who, like, in the sort of like narrow kind of parameters of what he does, he's been super efficient. Like, he's been crazy efficient offensively everywhere. He's a smart cutter. Like I mentioned, like the spacing thing, how all eyes go to the drivers of OKC. He's been really clever about like cutting at those 45-degree angles into the lane and has made a living off of that. The other thing too is he really, really competes. Like he's a really smart player. It was frustrating for me personally.
Fits in with that team because that whole team is just super competitive.
Yeah, they draft bright kids. Like if you listen to the interviews, like they had a round table with like a lot of their youngest players, and I was like, these are all just like really bright guys. Like they think the game really well. And Kaysen does. The question for Kaysen now is just kind of like how much can it expand from here? Like I think that he could become like I don't know about like a primary long term, but like he could grow into a guy for them that could make some decisions on the ball. He opens up so many possibilities. But the defensive class thing, I brought this up to you because I didn't want to get too carried away. I was looking back, like 2007 is about as far back as I got. I just think if you think Wemby, Chet, Asar, Amen, I still think is a great defender. Anthony Black, Koulibaly, Kaysen, Lively, Hawkins,
Well, yeah,
Kamara,
Koulibaly. We didn't even talk about Koulibaly on the defense side. Yeah, that's another one.
Parisian Pippen. Omax, I think, is going to be a good defender. Andre Jackson, if he gets a chance. Jordan Walsh, if he gets a chance. Leonard Miller.
What
if he
about the
gets a chance.
psycho on Portland? I love that guy. What's that? He made your rankings too. I'm blanking.
Tamani Kamara. Yeah, I mean, he's
I
a
love
role
that
player.
guy. No, but that guy, that's an annoying player that always ends up on good teams. Like that, I guarantee that guy will end up on a Final Four NBA team in the next 5 years. Like, oh man, this guy, look at him doing stuff.
The tag for him, I said, was he was everybody's dad's favorite. He was going to be every dad in Portland. I guarantee you, like, if you could, like, audit the texts in Portland, like, I bet the percentage of dads who text their sons, like, love Kamara, favorite player. He's got those dad skills that are like,
he's the odds-on favorite to probably be the next person punched by Draymond Green. If you're doing who's next, I think he's definitely one of the favorites. I love Wallace, another great pick. Presti, who he clearly he's figured out something. He's figured out something with length and competitiveness and brains, and puts something into a supercomputer and it just spits out these dudes. The biggest loser with Wallace, though, I think is Giddey, because there might only be room for one in that one, and Wallace is younger and on a rookie contract, and Giddey still can't shoot. I love Giddey. I think he's important in that team, and he's another guy who's super competitive, but at some point he's going to have to learn how to make an outside shot to play the kind of minutes, or else you're not going to be able to have him out there in crunch time. So Brandon Miller, KOC was higher on him than Scoot. We argued about that a lot last summer, and he was just, his whole thing was like, I know what this guy is. Here's what he's going to do. He's going to come in. He'll be able to get a shot. He'll be a good defensive player. I think what surprised me about him, at least in the games that I've seen so far, he's a better all-around player than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
In my head, I just had him as more of like, he's just going to come in and be a guy who, a little like Keegan Murray last year. He'll shoot some threes, he'll get some shots, but he's not going to be that impactful on both ends yet. Maybe that'll come. But there's a feistiness to him that I like. And if he didn't have that incident happen last year, maybe he just goes too. I mean, maybe it's just a slam dunk. Everybody knows, oh, this guy should go too. We shouldn't even argue about this. But I see what he is. He makes sense to me. So you like him too, obviously.
Yeah, his shooting percentages, if you would look at them, you'd be like, oh, like that's lower than I thought from three. Like I believe in the shooting, not worried about it. He can come off screens, he can shoot, dribble, pull up. He's shown all that stuff and it's translating. He had a couple offers that were bigger. I think he had one at MSG that was like an 0 for 6, and then he had an 0 for 5 that's pulling him down a little bit. But I think a big thing for him is that he's not being too stressed. Like if he was being a little more like featured as like the primary ball handler, like I think it'd be a little messier, but he's like behind LaMelo and Gordon Hayward right now. I think his usage is in the teens. So he's just kind of coming along slowly. We're seeing it, but he competes on defense too. And he's a big body. The finishing and stuff is going to have to come around. There's a discussion about like, what's the ceiling? I said that I thought that he's somebody that, depending on how that goes this year, he could I have tiers in these rankings for anybody that hasn't seen it yet. And it's like, super starter, all-star, MVP, like, on down. He's somebody that I think could ascend to like that all-star status if he like really turns the corner on that front, because he can pass the ball, he can shoot the ball. So I'm a believer in those things.
Yeah, I don't see him as an all-NBA guy, but I do think he could be an all-star potentially. The thing with him, I like the shots he takes. And the percentages will go up, but the same thing with Maxey. Like Maxey will have games where he's like 8 for 22, but I like every shot he takes,
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Miller, like he's just got a nice feel for where to get to the spots that he wants. And he's got like his 3 or 4 shots that he knows he can probably make, but he's feels pretty complete. I've been impressed. He's also, when you see him out there with these other guys, he is a little like taller. I know we knew it as measurements were, but he doesn't feel like small rookie. It is a little Paul George-ish, like his size body. So,
Mm-hmm.
you had Keontae George at number 7. he's in a great spot because eventually they're gonna go. There's not even great players to tank for this year, but they're not going to be a playoff team, and they're already slowly like letting them drive the car around the driveway, but eventually they're just going to flip them the keys and we're off. But this feels like a steal. I mean, he was out of the lottery, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't
I
he
mean,
16?
yeah, I mean, yeah, his skill set, like if it's there, I think it made sense for them to reach for it because I think most people agreed on his like on ball talent. He's got that kind of like irregular rhythm kind of thing going on. He's
Yeah.
not a super athlete, but you can see like, okay, if this guy gets like really technically polished, kind of like Booker had a little bit of that. I don't want to say that he'll become Booker. That's a separate thing, but like that sort of that makes up for some of that like blow by speed, I think. And you know his like pick and roll, like the percentage of his possessions right now that are in the pick and roll, it's 42.3%. That's incredibly high for the rookies. And dribbles per possession is 4.75 per touch. So he's got the ball in his hands a lot. You said like around the driveway. I always make this comparison that like with ball handlers again in this kind of situation, it's kind of like giving like the keys to like a manual transmission like McLaren to like a 15-year-old. You're like, all right,
Right.
buddy, take it around the track. And you just hear him grinding the gears.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he's spinning out. And every once in a while he'll go 100, and then it's like, oh, he's learning how to drive. And so you kind of have to give a little bit of grace, I think, for some of that stuff. But
Well,
I believe in the shot making. Like, it's just, can he be a primary is the question.
yeah, he's at a really cute stage right now for a rookie. Like sometimes he's going faster than his body, and he'll drive to the basket. He's going so fast he can't even finish whatever. I don't
Mhm.
know, flying into the basket sport, but you can see it. And I honestly, Black, I've liked more than I expected on Orlando. I didn't understand the pick because I felt like they already had Fultz, and well, you're taking another tall guard who can't shoot, but he's different. There's a vibe. He there's a personality thing with him
Mhm. I know what
that
you're
I
going to say, I think.
that I think is super important. You can see it. Like he's like a quarterback on a football team. He's this kind of larger than life, charismatic, old school point guard, and he's a connector, and he's just trying to make everybody and get people the ball in the right spots. He's happy. Weirdly, it was the right pick, and I didn't feel that way at the time, but I think you don't need him to score 25 points a game. You have these two scorers. What you need is somebody that brings kind of the energy and the playmaking that he does. And he's tall and he's weird and he's just unusual. He's like an unusual player. Like, who would you even compare him to?
Oh gosh, that's tough. The
I
non-shooting
honestly don't
thing,
know.
it's so strange that this class has, you'll see little patterns and clusters of player types. This class has a bunch of big switchy defenders that are athletic and smart, but cannot
Yeah.
shoot the ball for shit. It's really weird. There's like 8 of them in this class that I like really believe in. I thought you were going to say the shot of him where he was on the bench where he'd made the big play and he was like all sad that he was depressed because he'd made like a negative play in crunch time, and it was like, he cares. I mean,
Right.
he's not going, it's like, but we've always known that about him. He's just a psycho competitor in the best way. I like one of the clips I spelled out in the profile that I would encourage people to check out is there was a play against the Lakers that almost went the length of the shot clock where he single-handedly disrupted him. D'Angelo kept trying to screen him with AD
Yeah.
over and over and over, and Black was blowing it up. He really cares. I still think that like, I was higher on the Jet Howard thing. I'm giving it more of the benefit of the doubt for the Magic. I
Yeah.
thought that like Kaysen would have been amazing with Orlando. I think Jordan
Ugh.
Hawkins would have been amazing with Orlando. Like they need movement in their offense, like spacing. They need something to distract from Cade and Paolo or from Franz and Paolo. Black, I think, helps them stay big and helps their defensive switchability. Just the shooting, it's the same thing again. I don't know that I have a comp for him though.
I was thinking he's kind of the guy I always kind of wanted Michael Carter Williams to be, because part of the Michael Carter Williams thing was he didn't have any of the leadership stuff, right? He
Mhm.
had the size, it seemed on paper, but there was just something missing. And this kid's the opposite, where he's just like a natural leader, And you mentioned the Hawkins thing with them. They took Jet Howard over Hawkins, right?
Yes, believe so. I don't have the
Yeah,
number in front of me, but
that's really rough. That's like, because Hawkins, like, he's Kerry Kittles. He's Kerry Kittles with a better 3-point shot, but you just kind of know what he is. Like he's going to be in the league for 14 years, just doing whatever.
yeah.
And I don't really know what that means for McCollum on that team. I know they signed McCollum to an extension. but you got his basically got his replacement just sitting there, and who could come in and probably put up 95% of the same stats, but he's on a rookie contract. So I don't know what that team is. That New Orleans team, they had a big win the other night. Like they're clearly something. I don't know if they're going to be able to stay out of their own way. They've had terrible injury luck. Like they've lost like almost their entire bench, but god damn, they have so much talent. Like just to bring Hawkins was like their 11th man, and he can come in and have these 30-point games. But he was one of the few where it was like you could kind of see what he was going to be coming out of the draft. Like, all right, I know what this is. And then he's been even better than I thought.
I said you can just sprinkle him on everything. I compared him. I was saying he's just like a food item that you can just put on everything. You're like, that tastes pretty good. That's great because he can shoot with movement. I mean, his shot is fast. I think he's at like 36.7 on like, but on a huge volume. And I think that the point I made in the piece is that like I really think they could ramp him up in like a Miami Heat type way where his attempts he's proven that he can do it at a high volume. And if they ramp him up and start using him off ball even more, if Willie Green decides to like really hit the gas with that, you pass a point as a shooter where, Steph and Clay obviously are like the benchmark for this, but you get in your mind like, oh, this dude's crazy. Like he will shoot this ball. Like Duncan Robinson is the same way. Like Hawkins, I think is eligible to do that because I think he can shoot it like that. And I want to see him and Trey Murphy play together when Trey Murphy is back and fully healthy because I think that would be a nuisance to guard.
I like that, dude. It's really so hard to come in as a 2 guard and do a Ray Allen imitation, basically, when you've been in the league for 3 weeks. It's crazy that they were able to rely on him like that. You had him 8. I would have had him 7. You had Hawkes 9. That's just shots fired at Scoot at that point. I like Hawkes, and he's a very good role player for Miami, and he's exactly as advertised. And he's kind of slid into their crunch times a little bit. It's like, you see, all of a sudden there's 3 minutes left and he's kind of still out there.
I feel like this would be your favorite player. I was teasing you about him. I didn't know if you were sour about it and you were like, oh, God damn it. But
no, I love him. I mean, they did it again. They drafted the perfect guy for them. We'll see, we'll see with the 3-point shooting. Ultimately, that'll be whether he stays on the floor or not in the big moments. But he knows where to go and what to do. And they always seem to have these dudes that's the first thing you would say. They know where to go. They know what to do. I would not have Scoot lower than him though, just because Scoot had 3 bad games. And I'm buying everyone's Scoot stock. Just quickly racing through the rest. You had Sasser at 11. Jesus Christ. Where did this guy come from? He's like, came out of NBA Central Casting as a heat check 3rd guard off the bench. He's a mix of 20 guys that we've seen succeed, right? He's like clearly a 6th man of the year candidate 4 years from now. And it's just instant offense.
He's a guy who was like a big time dribble pull-up shooter and defender in college. He played at a program that like he likes to defend. He's a guy that looked a little smaller to me when I saw him in an NBA game. I was like, man, he looks really small, but he's a smart, when you have a big playmaker like Cade, you can play a scorer. I made like a very, pump the brakes, nobody take this like 1-to-1, but it's like, it's the Luka Brunson thing. When you have a bigger playmaker like that, you can put a guard size guy next to him.
Totally.
But he's just been seamless. I think he's a steadiness.
He's going to take the Ivy. He'll take the Ivy's spot. I feel like
it's possible.
Or he'll take a lot of those Ivy minutes because he's the more idealistic version of what you would want next to Cade. I think you're right. Sasser, there's crunch times and he's just out there taking big shots. You had Black, number 12. My guy Kamara, number 13, who's definitely getting punched by Draymond at some point. Vezenkov, number 14. Fundamentals. He'll end up on the Warriors in like 3 years. Possibly. And then you had Amen Thompson at number 15. Koulibaly, I almost feel like this should have been a 16 because Koulibaly's done enough. And I hate watching the Wizards, but anytime I've watched them, I've just been intrigued by him. And it just seems like he hustles. He's got a weird, long, athletic body, and he's just clearly is like, all right, keep an eye on this dude. I don't know if it'll happen this year for him, but it seems like he's getting more minutes at least.
Yeah, I mean that's one that like that's a totally valid argument I've heard the most from Wizards fans, and they're not out of bounds saying that to me. I like Koulibaly. There's a reason I call him Parisian Pippin. I'm a believer. Like he was the guy that was like right there that I was just like do I need to go get this guy on the list? Vizinkov's a guy that could slide, and I could see Koulibaly climbing on this list. He's in that cluster of guys that the defensive upside, and you watch him out there and he doesn't look lost. He's a guy who grew a lot. He's one of those kind of point guard size guys that grew late all at once. So he just has a nice processing kind of power. You hear that it's a nerdy way. He just thinks the game really well for a young guy.
Really fun draft. I would say on the higher end of drafts with crazy upside, and then the bonus of Chet somehow counts for this draft, at least for this rookie class. But if you're counting him as in this rookie class, which is kind of unfair, but I think we have to. This is one of the best rookie classes we've had. And the defensive and the switchability and just some of the 101 unicorny kind of qualities that some of these guys have is pretty unusual. Maybe this is just where the league's going. Like, oh, here's our 6'8" point guard, and here's our 6'10" skinny Sean Marion guy. And, maybe the league's just going to get weirder and weirder. But this is a weird draft that has been really good. You didn't have Hendricks in there. We haven't seen enough of Hendricks yet. Do you like him?
I like him. I think, I'd been told that he was going to spend some time in the G League, which I was totally in favor of.
Yeah.
It's possible he could have a resurgence. And Jarris Walker's another guy who Rick Carlisle, surprise, didn't want to have on the floor because he's just not ready. The Pacers already have enough defense. Vizinkov has a similar problem where it's a team trying to, they're just hemorrhaging points. Kind of the Pacers are doing it by they're like, all right, we're just going to outscore you. But he's a guy who just isn't quite ready to defend. I was kind of in the middle on Jarris Walker, but that's kind of that was the reasoning there.
I think this rookie class is yet another reason we need 2 more NBA teams. We have so much talent, like dudes that aren't getting enough time now. And part of it is just there's too many good players. And you look at somebody like Thompson on the Rockets, and it's like that dude's not going to play. He's on a team that has a bunch of veterans. He'll be lucky to play 12 minutes a game. We have no idea what he is. So, all right, Kyle, man, great job in the rookie rankings.